I always wanted to be a reporter. I don't really know why, but from a kid there was just nothing else but being a reporter. And we moved to Maplebrook Street in Lawrence, South Carolina, in the 5th grade. And I put out a little paper, the Maplebrook Gazette, and hand wrote it, maybe 10 copies. I wish I still had one, and took it door to door. Had news like Calvin Coolidge, Craighead, and his family were moving away from Maplebrook. You're really old if you remember somebody who was named for Calvin Coolidge. And we hated to miss him. He always skipped up and down the street, Calvin Coolidge, Craighead. And after that, I started selling the Grit newspaper. I don't know if you remember it. It was a little paper out of Pennsylvania, and sold that door to door. And then I was delivered papers for the Greenville Piedmont and the Greenville News, and we'd win trips to go see Furman play football and things like that. And so it was always newspapers. And came to go to college, and my mother heard a radio preacher, J. Allen Blair, who had a daughter who went to somewhere called Covenant College. And so she put me on the Greyhound bus, or Trailways, and came up here, and Roy Fagan picked me up and took me up to this old castle in the clouds. And so I went there 4 years. I always thought you can either write or not write, and didn't really want journalism training so much, but liberal arts education, and I got that there. And I went home for that last summer, and I thought I would have to start out at some maybe little country weekly paper, but I came back for a wedding in Chattanooga, and I had a recommendation from Joel Bales, who was at Covenant, and he later started the World magazine over in Asheville, Christian magazine. It's still going, and he had a good recommendation, so I took it down to the Free Press. That was the afternoon paper, the Chattanooga News Free Press, and the morning paper, the competitor, was the Times. And he had me in, and he always had you write out he gave you a little assignment to write out, and he said he kind of worried that I did it again in handwritten instead of the typewriter, I guess. But I guess it was good enough, so he hired me. He said he had some that would fail that. We had this guy named Robin Hood who came in to be a writer, and he filled out the thing, and Lee looked at it and said, "You're going to be a photographer." And he became a Pulitzer Prize winning photographer, and lives at Franklin, Tennessee, done a lot of books on Lamar Alexander and things. And so I had a job there at the Free Press, and it was in 1971, and Gutenberg invented the printing press in the 1400s, and we were on pretty much the same system. When I got there, it was linotype and these rose trays of metal, and very very similar to what he invented. But as I went on, things changed rapidly. But I got into a real group of characters there at the Free Press. Julius Parker was the city editor. He'd been in World War II, kind of a tough guy, but he was really good at recognizing it. He called it talking story, and he was a good city editor. And then his assistant was Buddy Houts, who was a real character, always pulling tricks on J.B. Collins. J.B. hated certain songs. He hated, I can't think of them. Singing Dogs headed that one. And that singer, Barbara Streisand. He hated Barbara Streisand. And Buddy would always play it right beside him. And J.B. Had been there a long time, had a colorful career, a lot of great stories, and he was the city. He covered the city beat, and then I got to where I covered the county beat. So I would go to the school board, county school board, and the county. Back then it was the quarterly court and the county council. The first one I had was Judge Frost. He was back then, and then back at the paper we. Some of our reporters, Tom Griscom, who later went on to the White House, and worked for Senator Baker, and John Vass was there a long time, and Ronnie Moore. We just had a great staff and a lot of fun. It was a real family atmosphere. And the editor was Lee Anderson, and he was always great to me. He finally got me to writing editorials when he was gone, which was a daunting task. And he didn't take many vacations, but he loved to ski in Colorado, so I would have to do that. And the way he did it, you covered up, you filled an entire column, and so you had to make it fit the lines. You not only had to figure out what to write about and get it straight, you had to make it fit. So I had to do that. And back then, on each of our desks, we had a big, scary-looking thing called a spike, a metal spike. And when I started, we were on a black manual typewriter. And we would type our stories on that typewriter, and then we'd put it on the spike. And then the copy boy, who was David Palmer. We called him Lightning because he ran around so quick. He would come and get that off your spike, run it up to the Julius and Buddy, and they would check it out. And then they'd put it on their spike, and Lightning would take it over to the copy desk, and that's the people around the circle who would give it a real check for grammar and all of that. And the head one was Stanton Palmer, the father of Lightning, and they called him Pokey. He was real slow. And had a group of great guys, Tom Gilliland, and some of them had been in radio before, around the copy desk. And the next place beside Lee Anderson was Roy McDonald, who was owner of the paper. That was his office, and it was just piled high with stuff. And you wouldn't think he would know where any of it was. And but you'd be talking to him and said, "Let me find that," and he'd go over to the pile, and there it would be. And he had first been in the home stores, the grocery business, and he put out a little circular and had started having some news in it, some sports in it, and he found out he liked the circular business better than the grocery business. So he bought the Chattanooga News, which had been around since 1888, came for sale, and he bought it and went in full time into the newspaper business and bought the old spinning mill on 11th Street, where they're still located, and started that paper. He was kind of a gruff guy, but he was very good to me. I was interested in history and started writing a book on Lookout Mountain, and somehow he found out about it, and he stopped one day and said, "Let's publish that book." And I said, "Great." And we published it, and he gave me full-page advertisements, and it's something you'd never think of today. And it really, we sold 3 or 4 editions of the Lookout Mountain book. And then I'm thinking, he's not getting any younger. Maybe he'll do a Chattanooga book. So I spent 3 hard years writing Chattanooga's story, and he published it and gave me full-page ads, and we sold a whole lot of them, several editions. And he lived to be 89. He lived far beyond that. I didn't really need to finish that quick. But and after a while, not too long after I got there, we went off the manual typewriters, and it was a big advance. We got the blue Selectric typewriters, great big things, and that was a big advance. And then much later, we started hearing something about the computer, and upstairs they had a early version of the computer. But I was going to say that after my story went from the city desk to the copy desk, that lightning would grab it from the copy desk, run it over to what they call the chute, and it went up to the 3rd floor. It pulled the chain, and up on the 3rd floor was the composing department, and they did all this. They had all this linotype, and a big linotype machine. Mr. Roy would go up there sometime and play around on it. And but so it was. I was very happy there, and got to do features and all of these. My beat, and there were some big trials. The Bobby Hoppy case, the football player who was charged with a murder in North Chattanooga from 30 years back, and there was the Signal Mountain murder case with all the 3 people who were killed up there, covered that. And down in Lafayette, there was the crematory case where all the bodies were found. And then the Sam Parker case. And one time I got to go to Jackson, Mississippi, to cover the Medgar Evers case. And that was because the suspect, the man who was charged, Byron D. Lop Beckwith, lived on Signal Mountain, and he and his wife would come down to the paper a lot, and they liked us. I'm not sure that was a recommendation later on, but so we knew them, and so that's the angle. And I got to spend about 2 weeks, and Bobby DeLauder was there, the prosecutor, and it was, I guess, maybe Mississippi Burning is about all that, so that was neat to be a part of that. But back then, the newspaper had a big monopoly on the advertising, and there was enough money that there could be 2 papers in town, sometimes 3. But there came to be a shift where TVs were developing more of their news departments. Radio was getting some ads, and so the advertising was not coming in like it used to, and we heard about some cities not being able to have two papers anymore. But this was after Mr. Roy had passed. One morning we came in and nobody said a word. We knew what had happened, that he had died, and that kind of changed the dynamics. But it wasn't too long after that till we started hearing about maybe it would only be 1 paper. And the people from Little Rock, Arkansas, bought our paper, and then they later bought the Times and merged them into 2. And that was 1999. And I'd always loved getting a scoop, and now there was only 1 paper, so there wasn't anybody to scoop. And it wasn't the old family situation, and they didn't really want the older people, the guys around. We made more money, and they kind of pushed us out. So I was really looking forward to competing and staying in the newspaper business, staying in Chattanooga. And I heard about the idea of an online newspaper. There weren't many back then, and at the time I didn't even know how to do email. I'd ask John Vass if I had an email, he would do it for me. And but there was a young guy who knew something, who had connections about the electronics of it, and so had a press conference and announced we were starting Chattanoogaben.com, and a lot of people had told me we thought you'd maybe last 3 months or something. And we did rely on her teacher salary for several years, but finally, my theory always was that if you have a lot of interesting material and scoops and features, and that people are going to come there, and if the advertisers see a lot of people coming there, they will advertise with you, and that's happened. We've been blessed through the years, and it was kind of fun to develop. I thought it'd always be just a paper reporter there at the paper, but it was fun to develop this new kind of newspaper. We had an obituary section, and for many years it was free, but we got to the point where we could charge for it. We were, I believe, the first online paper in the country that got to the point where we could charge for it, and now it has some good income for us, even though we still only charge $40 for an obituary, and mostly it's several $100s anywhere else. But we put them on as soon as we get the obituaries instead of waiting the next day. And we got had some columnists. We had Roy Exum for a long time, and we've got Mark Wiedmer, some good sports columnists. One who was with the Knoxville, Dan Fleeser, with the News Sentinel for a long time. He's with us, and Mark Wiedmer, who's a great columnist that was with the Times, and Jerry Summers writes a lot. He's quit lawyering and writing for us, and and one of our main writers is Mr. Freudenberg. There, he's a great contributor, and people really look forward to his. Ferris Robinson's a columnist. So it was fun to develop all these, and we've built up to a staff about 32 now, and so we still would like to do more, but you only can do. When I would get a big new ad, I would maybe add somebody, but you can't get ahead of yourself on that. But now there's so few papers, and it's really hard for them to make revenue that we're glad we found this way, and we give a lot of good news and community notices and all of this. We're proud that we found this way to still make it go, and so I'm still working hard and enjoying it. And I tell my wife, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm going to scoop the Times." So, any questions?
I actually have a couple of questions. Back in 1999, when you made your press release that you were going to be starting Chattanooga.com, did you know that what you were buying there, just the domain, that was going to be very important, and a valuable asset someday, or did you just...
the domain itself?
The domain itself.
Right. We really wanted to be Chattanooga.com, but somebody already had it. So we had to be Chattanoogaben.com.
Okay.
And never were able to get Chattanooga.com. And I always have to explain, put the N on there now, but at least we got Chattanoogaben.com.
I hate to say it, but I sure like looking at all those folks who get arrested.
Yeah,
you just speak the most interesting characters.
right. Yeah, the sheriff's site was down for about 3 weeks recently, and we got all kind of emails. Where's our mug shots?
Do you have other reporters that go about and get the news?
Yeah, I'm still active, but we have Hannah Campbell covers a lot of meetings, airport and clubs, and Carta, and Gail Perry covers all the outlying society days at Collegedale, which nobody else covers now, but there's a lot of interest in all those. And we've got about 5 sports writers. We try to, that's one thing that you really can't get anywhere else, high school games and all. So we have about 5 of those. And we've got about 4 editors. Most of those are family members. My daughter in Albuquerque, and my niece in Atlanta, and my son in Florida all help us with that.
I will say that if there's some breaking news, that's the first place I go to check it out.
Was it at all a different audience when you first switched over from the print writing, writing for print to digital?
I think it was it's hard to say, I guess, but I knew at the time, and I said this at the time, that this new online would have a lot of advantages. You didn't have to wait. With an old newspaper, you had to wait till it was printed, and then wait till the carriers took it out. But with this, you could go immediately, and the reader you could put it on. Like I covered this verdict last night on the first grade teacher thing, and we had it on 3 minutes after the verdict. We said we can put the bank robbery story on when the robber's still running down the street. So.
I'm curious what sort of reaction there was among the other journalists and reporters that were maybe still at the paper at the time you guys started. Like, what were their thoughts? Were they jealous? Did they see it as a threat? Did they think it wouldn't? I know you said people didn't think it would last 3 months, but did they feel that competition of getting scooped, so to speak?
Yeah, a lot of them were very sympathetic. I'd been friends with them, a lot of sympathetic, and the makeup of the reporters, it changed pretty quickly. They brought in new people, and so it wasn't the same people there. But it was pretty much that. Yeah.
John, what was it like to work with Lee Anderson?
He was a great guy. He always drove a Corvette. And he would get there at 4:30 in the morning and bound up the stairs. We had a shaky old elevator that Shorty ran, and Shorty he found him on the farm at Sail Creek. But Lee would run up the steps every morning, and he was almost never sick. About every 2 years, he would get some kind of allergy thing where his cheeks would puff up like a chipmunk or something. But that's the only thing he had. But he was a great guy, and he was sure good to me.
How did you get selected to write his story?
He just asked me to. I didn't volunteer. It was hard, but it was satisfying to be able to do it, and up to his approval. But his brother Herbert said, "I can always tell it's you or Lee," but still, it was good enough, I guess.
These books here, Chattanooga in Old Photos. Where did you get the photos?
I had some of them, and online I got a lot of them, and just various places. Yeah, the Heiner ones are at the library. There used to be 4 volumes, and tell me if I'm too late. Okay. The Heiner was a printer who started collecting a whole bunch of pictures, and I used to know him, go see him a little bit, the Chattanooga Pictures, and his family gave the collection to the library, and I went through those and pulled some out. The railroad book, I have an old Chattanooga map, 1920, and it showed all the rail lines and where the beltway was and everything. And Wes Schultz and I would go out and find all that, and so that's what it's about. And then there's 2 other books on Chattanooga. Now we're working on one on Cameron Hill, where there are all these beautiful houses that were there, and unfortunately they all got knocked down. I've always tried to tell a story where the people wouldn't know if I was on one side or the other. But most news people today, they kind of grind an axe with a story, which I really don't like. But I've always tried to go right down the middle, and people be scratching their head, well, is he for this or this? No, I'm just trying to tell a story.